This flyer was on my door. It's an invite to church. I've folded it over because the person even wrote their phone number on here. And of course, privacy. But it's an invite to church. And when I first saw this, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I just moved in. I was like, maybe I'll swing by, get to know the neighbors. I don't go to church that much, but I was like, I think it might be a good thing to do. And then I turned it over. And this is the message that was on the back. And at the top, it says, if you die today, would you be 100% sure that you would go to heaven? And this just made me groan so hard and made me frustrated and made me a little bit angry. And maybe I get more angry than most people because this is the message that I was indoctrinated into as a youth. And this is frankly the thing that I would go to malls and go to town centers and preach and try to convince people of. I had a tract similar to this with the same message. And just to run through it really quick, it's 4 steps. The first says recognize your condition. Basically, the point is that you're a bad person. Number 2, realize the penalty for sin. Basically, that because you're a bad person, you're going to hell. And then believe Christ died for you and rose again. And then trust Jesus alone and your Savior. And then you won't have to go to hell, even though you're still a bad person. My point that I want to touch on is that I think we can all agree that the thing Jesus told us to do is share the good news of Jesus Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Gospel means good news. And how does this sound like good news? Let's imagine for a second that you're having a really great day, that you just got engaged, or you really wanted to ask that girl out for a long time and she said yes, or you got a promotion at work, or your kid just won the tournament, the trophy, whatever that might be. And I come up to you and I say, you know what, you're a bad person and you're going to hell. You're a bad person and you're going to hell. Like, my goal is to come up to you and convince you that you're a bad person. How is that good news? Like, genuinely, just how is that good news? Or let's say you're having a really bad day. Like, you just found out your grandma's going to die, or your grandma just did die. Or maybe you lost your job. Maybe your kid got, relegated to being on the bench, or maybe they got injured. And I come up to you and say, you're a bad person and you're going to hell. Again, how is that good news? And this, to me, when I read the Bible, this doesn't seem to be how Jesus approached things at all. When I read about Jesus, he seemed to meet people where they were at. You're blind. I can see you're blind. I'm going to heal you of that. You're hungry. I see you're hungry. I will feed you. You are sick. I will heal you. He met people where they were at. In fact, I don't think Jesus talked that much about hell at all. I think the only people that Jesus seemed to have that discussion with was the religious elite, the people who should know. And maybe he was meeting them where they were at by having that conversation with them. There's a saying in very old Christianity, I think around like 120 AD, something like that. And it's the exact words are not important, but it's basically that tell everybody the good news of Jesus Christ. Only use words if you have to. And that, I just find that astounding. Only use words if you have to. And frankly, I found this freeing as well, as somebody who had been, like, our whole system of churches would indoctrinate us into this program, this way of thinking about salvation, and then drop us into, drop 80 kids, 80 15-year-olds or college students into a mall or a town square and say, now go share this message. I hated it. I tried not to. I tried to be good at it, but I hated it. I hated every second of it. And frankly, it just didn't work. Like, going up to people and trying to have this conversation with them, it felt awkward. And it didn't work. Nobody bought this from me. And I don't think many people buy this, period. Like, let's say you're not having a good day or you're not having a bad day. You just take this for what it is. Have a mental conversation about it. I'm a Christian, and if you came up to me with this, I would think, you're in a cult. It makes you like when you're having this conversation with somebody, you're presuming that they believe Jesus existed. You're presuming that they give the Bible any credence. Like you're just presuming so many things. And like as a mental argument, it just doesn't work. In fact, when I was, a youth again, the church I was a part of had this idea, had this mission to reach everybody in the whole town. I think it was about a town of 40,000 people. And so and it wasn't a big church, by the way, it was maybe 100 at its largest. And through flyers in some neighborhoods or through knocking door to door in other neighborhoods, whatever the things might have been, every single house was visited or a tract was delivered to it over the course of like a year or two. And you would think that if this worked, that if this message spoke to people, that people would start flocking to that church to learn about those things, to find whatever peace they had found in that tract. And, I'm not saying that was the point, that the church did it for numbers. But I think I'm just saying that if it's speaking to people, they will come. They will want to learn more. And it just didn't work. So it didn't work when I brought it to people. And it didn't work on a much larger level when a church is trying to plaster, this message to thousands and thousands and thousands. And the few times that it did seem to work, I knew people who had managed to pray this prayer with people. I never saw it be fruitful past that. It seemed like it worked, made them feel better for a minute, but then it didn't seem like it changed their lives long term. I can't speak to that. That wasn't my experience, but I didn't experience that directly, but that seemed to be the pattern. The message didn't seem to work practically either or long term. And honestly, at some point along the way, I was like, doesn't work. And I just abandoned it. And I haven't done it since. And I've felt so much relief ever since. And I started thinking about what is it? What is the good news? What is the thing that Jesus would want to share? And this comes back to the idea I shared earlier. Jesus met people where they were at. There was one time, and frankly, I started to examine, what do I have to offer people? So there was one time I was on a walk in the park, and there's a girl crying on the bench. And I just, I had a long day, but I stopped. I said, "Are you okay?" And, one of the things that my gifts is listen, offer perspective. And so I was just like, hey, I can listen. And I got 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And she told me what was going on in her life. And, I said, have you thought about it this way? Not here's what you should do or here's how it goes. Like, hey, have you thought about it this way? And then I said, look, I can pray for you if you want. And she wanted me to, so I did. And, I went on my way. And then a couple weeks later, I'm walking again, and she runs up to me, and I don't even recognize me. And she's just so excited to see me. And she introduced me to her 8-year-old son. I don't know what came of that. I don't know that it changed her life or anything. But for a minute, I got to meet her where she was at. And another time, I worked in the financial district, and it was -17. It was the day before Thanksgiving. And there's a woman sitting on the sidewalk with her son. He must have been 2 years old, and she's got him as bundled up as she can. And a couple people go to Starbucks and they put down a hot chocolate. There were like 2 or 3 drinks there for her and for her son. And I sat down and I talked to her because, again, part of my gift is listening. And I had no perspective for her. I had no perspective to offer her. I don't even know if I could pray for her. Like, it's -17 and she's out here with her 2-year-old son. And this is in the financial district, remember. Some of these people are walking by, they make millions of dollars a year. And so I went to an ATM and got her enough money for a hotel room for the night. It's negative, or for the day, because the shelters would take her in at night, but they wouldn't take her in during the day. And I'm genuinely thinking that this kid is going to die if he's out here in negative 17 all day. Like, his nose is running. And that's not to brag. Like, I had the money to give. I was really blessed at the time. It's not to brag. It wasn't a huge sacrifice for me or anything like that. And it happened years ago, and I don't think I've told anyone. So the point isn't glory to me, like, at all. The point is, the Bible talks about go be warm, and not giving somebody the coat, or go be full and not giving them food. And I had no business telling this person, hey, you're an awful person, you're going to hell. She doesn't need to hear that. She doesn't need to hear that. The point is, and the point to this isn't, hey, you need to do more, you need to give a bunch of money to people, you need to be a better listener, nothing like that. To pressure you into that is the same thing as pressuring people into sharing this tract, to pressure people into something that doesn't speak to their own heart. There's another old quote. It says something along the lines of, with Jesus' love, don't be a river. Don't be a river, be a well. Don't be someone that Jesus' life and God's life flows through straight to other people, and you get this love from God and then you immediately pass it on. Be someone who lets that love fill you up until the point where you're overflowing and you're gushing with it. And that water falls onto all the people around you. One sec. Okay, don't be a river, be a well. Let God's love fill you up to the point where it's overflowing onto the people around you. Because frankly, in order to share God's good news, we have to have experienced it. And so I would encourage you, like, if you've ever been in this condition, sharing a track like this, or sharing God's news with anyone, like trying to convince people to go to heaven, I don't think you have any business doing this unless you've experienced God's love, unless you've experienced the good news, and you can point to that. Isn't that what a testimony is? A testimony is literally just saying, I saw this. I'm an eyewitness to this. And in this case, I'm a heart witness to this. I know that Jesus works in my life. I know that God's love works for me. This is good news. This is the good news that I've experienced, and I want to share it with you, because God has met me where I am at, and he can meet you where you are at too. So my point isn't that you need to do more, or to pressure you into doing things my way, or to pressure you into giving more money or anything like that. I think just start with experiencing the good news, experiencing God, and letting it fill you up first. See, I got a couple more notes here. I think that's actually about it. So I think I'll leave it there. The good news, the gospel of Jesus, isn't convincing people that they are bad. It's not taking them down these verses. These are a pretty common set of verses, by the way, to tell this story. They're cherry picked from the book of Romans. They aren't even in the order that they are, that they appear in the book of Romans. And the modern evangelical church has codified that this is how salvation works. I think that's another conversation for another time. I think that to try and force this as a conversation is frankly a bit of a trap to ourselves. And I say this again as somebody who has experienced this. My experience with this was a lot of pressure to a point where I couldn't work through my own relationship with God, where I couldn't let him meet me where I was at because I was so afraid of going to hell. And I just knew I was such a bad person, and there was no way that, I didn't believe that I could make God love me. I knew it was just a prayer, but even the prayer, could I do that right? Could I even accept him correctly? So it was a trap. And frankly, I think the people sharing this, I don't think they're ill-meaning. The person who left this on my door, I don't think was ill-meaning at all. I think they had the best of intentions. But I would imagine if they're anything like me, This message, this belief, is more of a trap than it is a freedom. So, good news isn't convincing people they are bad. It's helping them see that God meets them where they are at. And in order to share that with them, we first need God to meet us where we are at. I think that's the good news.